Yeah, hello, this is Dave from cheapbooks.com playing World of Tanks. This video is about HE rounds, which are high explosive rounds. I use about 30% HE rounds, which is 1/3, on almost every single one of my tanks. Not on every tank, but almost every single one of my tanks. Sometimes I use a little less. There's a lot of misconceptions. People think you only use HE rounds to reset cap or against tank destroyers that have open turrets. It's not true. I'm going to show you some examples of when you would use HE rounds, and then I'm going to show you some gameplay. So one of the prime targets is going to be a tank like the T-28 prototype. You'll notice that it has a round circular turret, and usually, I mean, it might not be true for every tank, but usually the sides are weaker than the front. And if this tank is aiming its gun at you, you can fire a high explosive round at the side, which is where the star emblem is, and you can cause damage to that tank that you otherwise would not be able to cause. And a lot of the tanks that have round turrets, they tend to be Chinese and Russian tanks. Here's another example. Like if you fire a high explosive round and hit the star on either the left side or the right side of the turret, then you can cause damage to this tank when otherwise a round would just penetrate. And the same is probably true for the top of the tank. So that's an example of when you would use HE rounds. Another example is you see there's a little hole over here. Every tank has a hole that the gunner has to look through when he's aiming the gun. He physically looks through a hole. If you can fire an HE round and hit that hole, you can injure or kill the gunner, which affects the load time of the tank, which hurts the performance of the tank. And I've done that many times also. So I'm going to show you gameplay that shows how it happens. The last case is going to be side scrapers. A side scraper, they have a belief that if they show the side of their tank, everything's going to bounce off of it. Not true. If you fire an HE round at the side of a tank while he's side scraping, you're probably going to cause damage. So when I see people side scraping, I immediately load up my HE rounds. There's also a video that I saw. I've never been able to recreate this, but I saw a video on YouTube where they fired HE rounds at the ground underneath the tank. In this case, it was a mouse, because the weakest armor is beneath the tank, and the explosion caused more damage to the tank than anywhere else where they hit the tank. So supposedly it is possible to cause damage to heavily armored tanks simply by aiming a high explosive round at the ground underneath it. And I have tried, and so far I have failed to do so, but I have seen a video that does do it. Okay, so that's enough about HE rounds. I'm going to show you some video gameplay. You're going to see some amazing stuff. I'm going to talk really quick about the engine and setting the engine on fire. To set the engine on fire, the engine also includes the transmission. Now you're going to notice something about these tanks. These wheels, most of the wheels are actually, if you look where the axle is for each wheel, it's underneath the hull of the tank. However, the first wheel and the last wheel are actually in the hull of the tank. And that means that there's an axle. If you look at the center point of the wheel, there's an axle that goes across the front of the tank, and there's one that goes across the back of the tank. And it's got to be lined up with the center of these wheels, which also means that if you fire a shot right to the exact inside of the wheel, you might also hit the axle, and the same with the rear. I'm going to spin it around this way. If you fire a shot right between the gear to the right of the wheel and centered on it, but at an angle, you can also hit part of the transmission. And for people that want to set the engine on fire, I've done some experimentation. I shot a lot of shots at the top, and I failed. However, when I started shooting, when I started shooting lower on the hull, twice in a row, my first two attempts, I set tanks on fire. So I had a lot more success firing shots to set the engine on fire lower at the hull. Of course, if you can shoot one right here, you'll set that engine on fire. Okay, so we're going to show some gameplay about high explosive rounds. This is experimental games. It's not a refined technique, so you're going to see a lot of shots that are not that impressive, but you're going to find that there were a lot of cases where I damaged tanks that otherwise the penetration just would have bounced off. The best example, let's say this tank is going to fire at you. You have to expose a certain amount of your tank before he fires his gun. So if you only see a sliver of his tank, he's not going to fire. If he only sees a sliver of your tank, he's not going to fire. You tend to want to see something worth hitting, which might be this surface on the piked armor. However, what you can do is only go far enough that you can see the little bit of this curved surface and shoot around at it and cause damage, and the enemy tank is looking for your flat surface or your lower plate, and he won't see it because you're only going to show a little bit of your tank. Hopefully you'll see some examples in the game. But by doing that, you can poke out, shoot, damage the other tank, and reverse, and the enemy won't even fire a shot. And you can do it again and again and again, and they'll have absolutely no clue as to what you're doing. Okay, so enjoy the videos. If you have any questions or comments, please post below. Yeah, this is Dave from cheapbooks.com playing World of Tanks. The tank is a T-44. I believe this is a Russian Tier 8 medium tank, and the map is Cliff. This is going to be a really good game that's going to show the effectiveness of high explosive rounds. I believe that if you look at the chat comments, I was recommending someone was concerned that there were a low tier tank, and I was saying, oh yeah, just use HE rounds. Now, a lot of people understand how HE rounds work, and I just want to go over it very quickly because the action is going to start right here. Most people say, oh, you use HE rounds against tanks with open turrets, against light tanks, and to reset cap and nothing else. And they're wrong. It's just absolutely not true. I had heard different things about HE rounds, but a lot of what I discovered is through my own experimentation. You use it against side scrapers, you use it against tanks of higher tiers, you use it to knock out things like the gunner or to knock out the gun to cause critical hits and internal damage and things like that. And the other time you can use it is you can kill like a mouse by aiming the round at the ground beneath the tank and causing an explosion that damages underneath the tank. There's a video on YouTube that shows how to do it. I am going to use HE rounds in this game against tanks that are of a higher tier, and I'm going to cause damage to them. And it's not going to be 10 hit points a shot. It's going to be a lot more damage. And it's going to be damage that I would not have been able to do with regular rounds. Watch what happens. First of all, love to play from this position. A lot of people go up to the top, and at the top it's good for spotting, and it can be okay for shooting down, but there's a risk that you'll slide down and everybody can shoot at you. But I love to play in this position because you can hit all these tanks over here, so I often play here or down below. If there's another tank here, then obviously I don't, but when I get the chance, I like to play right in the...
Ready to fire!
Now notice that I have 10 HE rounds, and I'm going to be firing HE rounds at the start of this game.
Critical hit.
So this first tank, which is an E50, it's a higher tier than me. I did 110 damage using the HE round, and that's an example of where it will be effective. So you can see I hit him again with a high explosive round. I did 127 damage. That shot completely missed. And obviously I'm using the auto aim.
Critical hit.
So I did 146 damage. Now that shot appeared to hit him on the side tracks. If I had fired that with regular rounds or even with the gold rounds, I probably would have penetrated nothing and done no damage. So as you can see, I'm averaging around 125 damage with the high explosive rounds. The regular rounds do double the damage, 250. Now, as you can see, it says 330 damage with the high explosive rounds. That's if you get a penetration, but I'm not doing penetrations. I'm doing critical hits, which means it's not penetrating the tank. I'm still getting around 125 damage, which is half as if you're using a regular round. And it's against a higher tier tank, and you get more experience.
I don't see the target.
You get more experience when you damage a higher tier tank.
We've lost the track.
As you can see, someone spotted me.
Ready to
It's
fire.
very
Enemy is hit.
apparently an invisible tank over there.
Enemy armor is destroyed.
Okay, so that was the Japanese Tier 8 STA. And for some reason, it did not show up in the replay. I don't know why. Oh, there it is. Okay. So there's a bug in the replay. That's the tank. You can see. I'm going to rewind it so we can watch that again. And remember, I'm using the high explosive rounds, and we're going to see how much damage we did, and hopefully we'll see where the tank was hit. And he's also... What tier is he?
Ready to fire. Enemy armor is damaged.
Okay, so there's a bug in the replay. It's not showing it. There he is.
Enemy armor is destroyed.
Okay, so he's a Tier 8 tank, and based on the angle he was, it was the right choice to use the high explosive rounds. So when I'm in a tank and a large portion of the team is of a higher tier, I start out the game with high explosive rounds. Number two, if I think I'm going to confront higher tier tanks, like if they have one higher tier tank, but it's a fast tank, which means it's going to be early on the battlefield, then I'll use high explosive rounds. And you'll see that the enemy team has 1, 2, 3, 4 higher tier tanks plus 2 higher tier SPGs, which is why I chose to use the high explosive rounds.
Critical hit.
So that was 279 damage with a high explosive round. And as you can see, that's more than if you use a regular round. And I believe I hit him on the side armor. I'm really not sure. So you can see the most people say, well, high explosive rounds only cause a small amount of damage. But that proves that it's not true. You can do a lot of damage with high explosive round. And they're less expensive than the APCR round.
Target unlocked.
Reason why I use it.
Target acquired. Let's find another target. Target acquired. Critical hit.
As you can see, that we got another situation with the replay where we have tanks that are spotted that we can't see. I'm going to see if I can rewind it and maybe pick up those tanks. Obviously, it's a bug with the replay. This game was played within the last couple of weeks. Hopefully we'll be able to pick it up. Okay, there he is. You'll see that the tank that I probably hit was that T-62A, which is 2 tiers above me.
Target unlocked. Ready to fire. Target unlocked. Ready to fire. Critical hit.
So I did 128 damage to the T-32. Again, with a regular round, I would have done double the damage. But I decided to continue shooting high explosive rounds.
Target lost.
Now, the reason why I'm shooting high explosive rounds is because I am testing different conditions. In this particular game, most of my high explosive rounds, the intent is to hit the side armor to see how much damage they do.
Permission to engage. Where'd they go?
I do have 1 kill.
Ready to fire. Let's find another target.
I do want to point out that I probably missed that tank because I was using the auto aim, but that's irrelevant. he's a little bit far. He's a fast tank. I probably should have aimed manually. The shells have a velocity when they shoot out of the gun. They go at a certain speed. If you have a high velocity shell and you use the auto aim, you don't have a problem. But if you have a low velocity shell, it takes longer for the shell to get to the target, which increases the chance you're going to miss. I believe that, as a general rule, high explosive rounds are probably lower velocity than regular rounds. So if you use a high explosive round at a distant target that is moving, you're probably going to have to aim manually. Being high up is good when you want to shoot at enemy targets. Okay, so that's a regular round. I did 270 damage, and it's a tier 9 tank. Of course, he has very thin armor.
Target unlocked.
I do shoot at tanks that are not spotted. Every day I kill unspotted tanks, which is obviously why I do it.
Target acquired. Where'd they go?
As you can imagine, right now it's 12-4, so we're going to hunt down the remaining enemy tanks. And it's like I say in my other videos, if you want to get kills, you have to hunt the enemy down. It doesn't look like there's any enemy tanks near me, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to get one more kill in this game. Looks like I got stuck over here. There was a game where I got stuck like that, and I actually unstuck myself by firing the gun, and firing the gun actually gave me the momentum to free myself.
Target acquired.
It's too bad that I missed. Okay, so that was the game. I got 2 kills. Apparently I ran into my ally on that. I got 2 kills. It's the T-44. This is a Tier 8 a Tier 8 Russian medium tank. I did 1,400 damage. I got the second EXP. I was actually I was very close to getting the top EXP, but we were probably only a few points apart. And I do like this tank. As you can see, I do not use the automatic fire extinguisher here. I use the small repair kit, large repair kit, and the first aid kit. And this is exactly what you want a medium tank to be. When you think medium tank, the T-44 is a perfect example. It's got the speed, the armor's okay, the gun is nothing special, but this is the type of tank that is an ideal medium tank. And for its tier, I love playing it. I wish I had more games in this tank. And I believe that there is a premium tank, which might be called the T-54 Lightweight, I'm not sure, which is similar to this tank and probably has the same play characteristics. Okay, so that's the T-44. It shows the use of high explosive rounds. So basically, when you're against a higher tier tank, use the high explosive rounds against them. However, you want to hit them in the side. You want to hit them in the tracks or in the, ideally in the tracks. If you hit them in the lower body, you're probably going to cause damage to enemy tanks. On every single shot, you can see that I did 125, 150 damage, so it's totally worth it. I do have other videos that I will have with HE rounds, and there's other places and other techniques that I will use them, so keep an eye out for my other HE round videos. If you have any questions or comments, please post below, and if you want to join my clan, CBKS, please feel free to apply or contact one of our recruiters. Thank you. Now, in this game, I'm going to go up against a Centurion 1 and an IS-6. We're all Tier 8 tanks, heavy tanks, and I'm going to fire 4 or 5 regular rounds, the majority of which are just either going to miss or fail to penetrate. And then I'm going to switch to HE rounds, and you're going to notice a big difference. There's a few important things that are going to happen. I'm going to do some damage. I am going to knock out the gun of the IS-6, and he's going to actually hide from me for a while because his gun is damaged and needs repairs. And plus, I'm going to do a substantial amount of damage to the Centurion using HE rounds. So let's see what happens. This is with at first regular rounds.
We didn't penetrate their armor. We didn't penetrate their armor.
Now I switch to the APCR and I'm waiting for it to reload.
Enemy armor is hit. We didn't even scratch them.
Now I'm switching to the high explosive rounds. And this is going to make a strategic change in the game. In this type of a situation, most tanks would not fire in this type of a situation because most rounds, AP and APCR rounds, will ricochet. They'll ricochet off the turret or they'll ricochet off the side of the tank. However, an HE round will not ricochet. An HE round will cause damage to that tank as you see it right there. You can see I don't know if I did the 250 damage or if an ally did, but the tank did take 250 damage. And I'm not platooning with anyone. So based on what I saw, it indicates that I did the 250 damage. Actually, I don't know. I don't know if I did 250 damage or not. That's irrelevant. But I am going to do damage in this game. That's for sure. At some point I was wondering why the IS-6 was hiding so much. And in the after-game stats, it did show that his gun was damaged by me. Now you can see the Centurion. It showed 722 damage to the Centurion. What's interesting is that I've done this replay more than once. The last time I did it, it said only 655 damage. But the point is that I did set it on fire using an HE round. You can see it appears as though I did 159 damage with that shot to the Centurion. And again, that was with an HE round. Now, in that case, you could see I only saw a little tiny sliver of the enemy tank. And that's all you need to see, and you can damage it with an HE round. If I were using AP or APCR, it would have bounced. So in this case, the game was over for me. I only have 5 hit points left. And I did make a mistake, which is to go over the hill. I should have stayed where I was and taken the chance that I could have bounced his incoming shot. But unfortunately, I went over the hill, and he did kill me. This tank is the FV4202P. This is a Tier 8 British tank. I'm not sure if it's a medium or a heavy tank. Okay, this is a medium tank. So I am going up against an IS-6. I'm going to hit him perhaps 4 or 5 times using HE rounds. And I'm going to do around 500 total damage. I'm going to average around 100 damage per shot. There's going to be some that are going to do 70, some do 90. One will do 120. And by doing this, the reason why it's going to be effective is because he's going to be in a side-scraping position. And when he has the rounded turret in a side-scraping position, most of my AP or APCR rounds would otherwise bounce off of his armor. But because I'm using the HE rounds, most of them are going to penetrate and do damage. Oh, it's an IS-3, not an IS-6. Okay, so that was what that particular interaction was like. I didn't total up the total damage, but it was between 400 and 500 damage. The low was, there was one that only did 11 damage. There was at least one that did 70 something, 90 something, and I saw 120. But if I had used regular rounds, would have had a lot more bounces. And when you use the HE rounds, you also increase the chance that you damage the gun or injure crew members, such as the gunner or the loader, which reduces his loading time, or it could completely knock out his gun so he absolutely wouldn't even be able to fire. That's why I use HE rounds. And they are effective against higher tier tanks. You can use... yeah, this is Dave from cheapbooks.com playing World of Tanks. The tank is the Japanese STA-2. This is a Tier 8 medium tank, and the map is Mines. This is a Tier 8 tank. It is a Tier 9 and Tier 10 battle. And you'll notice that I have my high explosive rounds loaded, and the reason why is because it's difficult for me to penetrate tanks that are Tier 9 or Tier 10. In front of me there is a T-30, which is a Tier 9 tank. It has a very strong turret armor. And normally, it's a high risk. You know, the T-34 has very, very strong frontal turret armor. I'm sure the T-30 does also. Now, the rounds, let's look at the damage. A regular round will do 240 damage, and the APCR, actually it's called High Explosive Anti-Tank, also does 240, and the regular high explosive, it says 320. So 240 damage is what I would use with a normal round. The only problem is there's a good chance a normal round will not penetrate. So let's see what happens when I fire a high explosive round at this tank. Okay, excluding the fact that I missed. I'm not going to miss on the next shot. Okay, so I did 99 damage. It wasn't the 240, and what happens is you increase the chance that you're going to cause damage, but in general it's half of what you would use, half the damage that you would cause with a regular round. Okay, so he's going to turn his gun. I aimed directly for his gun, and the reason why with a high explosive round is because you can knock the gun out if you get a critical hit on that gun, and unfortunately it did not work. So I'm going to try a second time.
We didn't even scratch them.
And as far as I know, it didn't work the second time either. I really don't know if I damaged his gun. I didn't check the replay to see if I did. What I do know is that very shortly after this, he is going to fire his gun. And he's going to kill that tank in front of him. And there it is. So he just fired his gun and he killed the tank destroyer. Now, I still have high explosive rounds loaded, and watch what happens. That tank, the M4190 GF, he's got 632 hit points.
Ready to fire.
I did 273 damage. Again, high explosive round. Now, look at what a regular round does. 240. So I did 273, which means the amount of damage I did with a high explosive round was equivalent to what I would have done with a regular round. And high explosive rounds are more likely to cause damage. They're less likely to ricochet. So it's comparable to using the armor-piercing composite rigid, the more expensive round, without paying the higher price. Next shot misses. And obviously I only did 47 damage, but I did remove the remainder of his hit points. So basically what we had is we did damage to the T-30. We had 2 head-on shots on the gun. I don't know if it had any effect. And then I did a high amount of damage to the light tank, which is expected when you use a high explosive round. And then I finished him off. And after that point, I'm no longer using high explosive rounds. Okay, so that's all I'm going to show for this particular video. However, I frequently use high explosive rounds on this map against higher tier tanks. I'm going to see if I can find some other videos. Now this is this is the M26 Pershing, and this is a game where I started out using HE rounds. You can see I did 76 damage. Now let's take a look at what a regular round would do. A regular round does 240. And in my experience, I often get around 100 damage. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I only get 10 or 20. It takes practice to figure out what works and what doesn't, who you're going up against, what tank you're firing from, etc. In this particular game, most of the shots are not going to do a lot of damage. So 76 might be the highest I'm going to get in this game. The rest of them are going to be rather disappointing.
One of our tracks is damaged.
But it's like I said, I mean, this was like any other game, you have to test it out to see what works and what doesn't work. It was disappointing. And this is a position that I like to play. There's objects in front of you, houses, there's a slope, you can hit people on the east and on the west. So I'm going to take the rest of my shots, a lot of them against that T-20.
Critical hit.
I believe that was 471 damage. It's not always clear because sometimes if you hit a tank and an ally hits that tank at the same time, it totals the damage together. But based on what I saw, it said 471 damage. And it's like I've said before, when you use high explosive rounds, you're going to get, I like to get 100 damage, but you're going to get 10, 10, 10, 500, 10, 10, 10, 10, 500. It happens often. So you can see that one was only 48.
Target lost. Target acquired.
That one was 92.
We've lost a track. They killed our driver. We're covering his position.
That one was 60.
Well. I don't see the target.
So I did have the 471 damage, and it's like I said, most people think you cannot do damage with high explosive rounds, and they're just absolutely wrong. That was 95 damage. Now the good thing about high explosive rounds is that they almost always do damage, so you're unlikely to have it ricochet. That was only 13 damage. So we had a low of 13, we had many shots that did around 75 damage, and we had one that did 471 damage. So as you can see, the numbers are high, the numbers are low. I use the high explosive rounds when I'm up against higher tier tanks, because you can't damage them with your regular rounds, or when you're just going to see that turret and a regular round is likely to ricochet, or against the side, the tracks on the side. If he were side scraping and I could only aim at those tracks on the side, absolutely use high explosive rounds. I do have a game where I hit a guy 5 times, 100 damage each, and he thought he was safe side scraping, and he was wrong. Okay, so that's the example I wanted to show. I ran out of the high explosive rounds. This is the M26 Pershing. It's a tier 8 tank in a tier 9 game. In this game, I am playing the T-34-85 Rudy. I'm a tier 6 tank. The vast majority of the tanks on the enemy team are tier 8 and tier 7 tanks, mostly actually tier 8 tanks. So when you're on the bottom and you're up against higher tier tanks, that's a good sign that you might need high explosive rounds. You don't know who you're going to come up against, but you're going to see that with the high explosive rounds, I am going to be able to do damage to some tanks that I might not have been able to penetrate otherwise. So let's see what happens. Oh, also, because I'm a low tier, I decided to play back in a more of a sniping position. Normally, I like to play on the front lines. However, this map doesn't have a lot of good places to hide and spot from, which is why I decided to snipe. And you'll notice if you look at the east side, there's only 2 tanks on the east side plus the Arty. So even if I were spotting on the east side, I wouldn't be able to spot for anyone. So it didn't really make any sense, which is why I'm over here. First shot missed. Second shot missed, and there is a good chance I'm out of their spotting distance.
Critical hit.
So that was 79 damage, and let's see what the rounds do. 144, oh I'm sorry, that was 180, 180, 300. So I did about half what I would have done with a regular round, but I did damage the tank. Regular round might not have damaged that tank. And he also left for some reason. I am beyond their spotting range, but unfortunately they're beyond my spotting range. At this point, unable to see anybody there.
We didn't penetrate their armor.
So that's 40 damage. 56 damage. 35 damage, and you'll note that it appears as though I hit him at a sharp angle on his frontal armor. If I had done that with a regular round, there's no way that would have penetrated. So I'm guessing I did around 200 damage to that tank.
Critical hit.
Obviously that was only 16. Okay, so that was 92 damage against the side armor of a tank that's 2 tiers higher than me. You can see that I was trying to track him. Obviously that shot missed. So finally I was spotted.
Target acquired.
That's 82 damage to the ARL-44. I'm not sure about this. You might want to double check, but I think it might be that the ARL-44 has the strongest armor for Tier 6, but I'm not sure.
Target released.
And he's dead. So at this point, I am no longer using the. I have one HE round left. And you can see that I am reloading.
Penetration. Where'd they go?
So the AP, was that an HE round? I'm not sure what type of, yeah, okay, so that was an APCR round. And you could see that I did do a lot of damage to that particular tank, even though he's 2 tiers higher than me. Now the CDC does not have a lot of armor. Doesn't have strong armor on it. The tanks that are faster tend to have weaker armor. Okay, so I guess I missed that final shot, but that shows you how I used high explosive rounds in this particular game, and I made some shots that might not otherwise have done any damage. Yeah, this is Dave from cheapbooks.com playing World of Tanks. The tank is the FV4202. This is a British Tier 8, I believe it's a medium tank, and the map is Westfield. Now, this is going to show high explosive rounds. I am a Tier 8 tank. I'm going to be going up against Tier 9 and Tier 10 tanks. And I've loaded up my high explosive rounds, and I'm going to show you that there's people who say there's people who think, oh, high explosive rounds are for resetting the cap and for tanks that are open turret that don't have a roof on them, you know, things like that. But it's not true. There's many other examples. As an example, we've got this tank right here. His strong armor is right here, what's called the gun mantlet, and the front of the turret. But once you get to the side, the armor is a lot weaker. And you can actually hit the side with a high explosive round when he's pointing the gun at you. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be shooting high explosive rounds, and usually I aim for either the gunner to try and kill the gunner, which means that he won't be... I'll either try to knock out the gun or injure the gunner so he has problems firing. Or I try to hit right along the slope, right at the edge of the slope where the armor is weaker. More towards the right, it's going to be stronger. More to the left, it's going to be weaker. So in that case, he turned his turret, which means that my aim on the side didn't work out. And I didn't do any damage. Okay, so I did a small amount of damage. Again, this is with high explosive rounds.
We didn't penetrate their armor.
Now that was a bad shot. I didn't want to aim at that. Now you can see well, he's definitely making it difficult for me. Have no idea if I even fired. Oh, I guess I did fire the gun.
Critical hit.
Okay, so I did a small amount of damage, hit a little bit too close to the front. That missed. Now you'll notice that what I did was, in this case, I was moving forward. I'm going to show you what I'm going to reverse it so you can see what I did. I'm going to...
Critical hit.
I got the critical hit. Now, my ally, the T-62A, is going to block my shot on the tank behind him, which is a T-30. Now, if I move backwards, I cannot hit the T-30. I have to move forward. However, if the T-62A reverses, if we both head in that direction, he's just going to continue blocking my shot. So what I had to do was I had to sit and wait for him to move. in order to hit the T-30. And I only did 40 damage, but don't worry about the amount of damage you do. Because what will happen is you'll do 40, 40, 40, 40, and then you'll get a shot that does 500. It doesn't happen every round, but what I've discovered is 1 out of 5 shots will do a lot of damage. And it makes up for the difference. I got 3 more rounds left. That was 99 damage. That was pretty good. And a shot like that, you cannot do that with regular rounds. I hit him right on the top of his turret. Impossible with regular rounds. It would have just ricocheted. I've got 2 more high explosive rounds left. Looks like I just wasted one. So you'll notice that that one did hit him. That did hit him on the side. Okay, so I ran out of the high explosive rounds, and I'm going to recap what happened. If you want to review it, you're welcome to rewind the video and verify what I say is true. Everything that hit the mantlet, which is the protective part at the base of the gun, didn't do any damage, which is common. Anything that hit pretty much anywhere else on the tank did do damage. I don't know what the low was. Maybe the low was only 20. The high was 99, where I hit a tank basically on the flat top of the tank, which looks impossible with a regular shot. The only shot that I fired with a high explosive round that otherwise was ineffective was the last shot, which hit the side of the M103 and didn't do any damage. Okay, so out of that, I think I had 2 mantlet hits. Let's say I missed 3 shots and the 1 ricochet. I probably had 4 that did damage. Maybe I did a total of 200 damage. Now we're going to regular rounds. Now watch the difference.
That one bounced.
Bounced. Hit him right on the side, ricochet. High explosive would have done damage.
Target acquired. We didn't penetrate their armor.
No penetration.
They killed our driver.
If I had shot a high explosive round, I probably would have done about 100 damage against that leopard.
Track hit. Ricochet.
I hit him right on that emblem, and it ricocheted. And if I had shot a high explosive round, I would have done damage, probably between 50 to 100 damage. Even though I had some low damage rolls in this particular game, you know, I am confident I would have done around 100 damage on his turret. So that's the difference. With the regular rounds, I did absolutely nothing. They all ricocheted. And I'm a tier 8 tank going up against 9 and 10s. Your choice is, number 1, sit back and hide, which I really don't advocate. Number 2, set up a flank, which is what I try to do. I didn't do it on this map. Setting up a flank means you're going to try and hit them on the side, which I do that on a lot of maps. Number 3, you use up your high explosive rounds and you aim for the sides of the turret. Or you try to hit the gun or the hole that the gunner looks through and get damage that way. Believe it or not, with the T-34, which has a high penetrating gun with high explosive rounds, if you do damage to a tank such as a mouse, for example, even if it's a small amount of damage, knocking out the gun, killing the commander, killing out the gunner, doing a small amount of damage, you get a lot of EXP because they're 2 tiers higher than you. When you damage tanks that are higher tiers, 1 or even 2 tiers higher, you get a lot more experience. So it's worth it to fire high explosive rounds in terms of experience, even if you're not doing damage. Number two, I've had games where I fired 5 shots at the enemy, did 500 or more, let's say 600 damage, averaging 120 per shot against higher tier tanks, and they didn't hit me at all. So I was able to do 600 tanks because they set up a side scrape, and the high explosive rounds work against side scraping. So I advocate learning to use it. This is an example where you can see that it is effective when regular rounds are not. And last of all, when they're the absolute most effective is not against these types of tanks. They're effective against tanks that have rounded turrets such as the IS-6, the IS-3, the 110, the WZ-111, the 112, and all the tanks that have those little mound-shaped circular turrets. And the reason why, it's very easy to hit the side that has the weaker armor with the high explosive rounds, and it doesn't ricochet. I have done it before. I've done it many times. This is actually the type of map you do it on. And when you use regular rounds, you will not penetrate, but you will with the high explosive. So that's why you should practice using the high explosive rounds and learn to do it. If you don't practice it, you'll obviously never learn how to do it. Figure out what works and what doesn't work. Okay, so that's another example of high explosive rounds. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for me in this game. It is the FV-4202. This is a British Tier 8 medium tank. The map is Westfield. If you have any questions or comments, please post below. Yeah, this is Dave from cheapbooks.com playing World of Tanks. The tank is the STA-2. This is a Japanese Tier 8 medium tank, and the map is Malinovka. Now, one thing you're going to notice about this particular game is that I'm a Tier 8 tank. It is a Tier 9 game. There's a very good chance I'm going to be confronted by Tier 9 tanks at the start of this game. And not only will I be confronted by Tier 9 tanks, but some of the Tier 8 tanks include the IS-3 and the IS-3A. And these tanks have a special shape to them that make them very difficult to penetrate. Now, what you're going to notice is that I have loaded HE rounds, which are high explosive rounds. And the normal rounds, we're going to hover over the normal rounds. As you can see, the damage is 240, and the damage for the higher penetrating rounds, the APCR, is also 240. And the high explosives, it says 320, but in practice, we're not going to get 320. We're going to get a little bit less. And most people think that you only use high explosive rounds to reset cap and things like that. It's absolutely not true. I'm going to do between 75 and 150 damage against tanks that I would not penetrate with the regular rounds, and maybe not even with the APCR rounds. So let's see what happens.
Permission to engage. Let's find another target. Target acquired.
Okay, so the first shot was against the M103. I did 20 damage. And the reason why was probably because of where the shot hit. It looks like it hit him in the lower plate. But pay attention to the shape of his turret. He has a rounded turret. And it's not spherical. It's got a, I don't know how to say it, a fluted shape to it. But it is a rounded surface. And what I've discovered through practice is that tanks that have a rounded turret are difficult to penetrate from a lower tier, or even of the same tier, using regular rounds. However, with high explosive rounds, I increase the chance that I will do damage, even though it will not necessarily be a lot of damage. So you can see that time I did 74 damage, and even though the amount of damage I'm doing right now is rather low, you're going to see that number go up.
But at least it didn't explode. Target unlocked. One of our tracks is damaged.
So that was 76 damage, but you don't want to aim for the tracks. You do want to aim for the turret. I mean, obviously that was effective, but we're going to see some better shots. If you want, you could take a look at this tank right here. This is the M103. You can see how it's rounded in the back. However, it is not a perfect circle. So that's the same tank that I'm shooting at. Now that time I did hit the turret and not the tracks, and I did 104 damage. Now keep in mind the regular rounds and the APCR do 240, and I've been doing a little bit less than I've wanted to, but I'm still doing damage to that tank that I might not have damaged with regular rounds. So in that case I did 153 damage. That's actually pretty good. 153 damage. Tier 8 against a Tier 9 is pretty good. You do get more experience when you are a lower tier tank and you cause damage or penetrations to a higher tier tank. So that is the type of penetrations I was able to do against this tank. I would use the same rounds against the IS-3 and the IS-3A. Probably not against the Tiger II. I would use regular rounds. And the Scorpion, you could use anything. I mean, you could tap the Scorpion. He's got 10 millimeters or 20 millimeters of armor. The T10, which is off there in the distance, I would use the high explosive rounds against the turret. Now let's look at my team. We've got the M103, absolutely would do it. I suppose against this tank you could use a variety of rounds. The T10, yes, high explosive rounds. The Conqueror, I would probably use high explosive rounds because of the curved shape of the turret. This tank, the T26E4, I would use regular rounds to hit this tank. Actually, I have heard that high explosive rounds will not be effective at all against this type of spaced armor. Okay, so that is my experience in this game with high explosive rounds. I just wanted to show you that they do work. They're not completely useless. You don't just use them to reset cap. The other time you use them is against higher tier tanks. In fact, if you read what World of Tanks recommends, the gaming company, they do recommend using high explosive rounds against higher tier tanks, but you have to know when to use them. You use them against the side armor, and you use them against rounded turrets, absolutely. And the third case is you can shoot a high explosive round underneath the tank and hit the ground underneath the tank, and the explosion will damage the tank. I've seen it done. I haven't successfully done it myself, but I've seen other people do it. So that's this particular tank, and unfortunately I'm very low on hit points, so chances are I will die.
This vehicle is heading.
Now in this game I have a YAG Tiger, and my opponent is an IS-3A. You can see he has 2/3 of his health, and I have full health. And I'm going to fire high explosive rounds, and the reason why is because if I shoot regular rounds, they're just going to bounce off of his turret. He's actually right here, even though the game is not drawing the tank. But the tank is right there. Because he's hull down, a regular round, even an APCR, has a high chance of just ricocheting. But what you can do is fire high explosive rounds at 3 different locations. One of them is the curved side of the tank, the turret, either the left side or the right side. You just hit the side of the tank and you'll probably do damage. The second thing you do is you fire at the gun mantle. And the gun mantle is the most armored and protected piece of the tank. However, you can damage the gun by firing at the gun mantle. And the way you do it is by firing high explosive rounds at the gun mantle. The third location is there's a small hole that the gunner looks through when he is aiming and firing the weapon. And if you fire a high explosive round at that small hole, it's to the right of the gun on this tank, then you can injure or kill the gunner. And if you injure or kill the gunner, then you'll affect the aim and perhaps the reload time of the tank. And the same with the gun. You can affect the aim and the reload time of the enemy tank by damaging the gun or the gunner or the loader. Because it's a mechanical loading tank, It doesn't have a person loading the tank. And I don't know if you can damage the actual loading mechanism. And you may also be aware that if you damage the ammo rack, you can also affect the loading time. Now, what you're going to see is this tank is we're going to fight back and forth, and my allies are going to take at least 2 shots at him. But you're going to notice that he is going to eventually start running away from me. He is going to lose all of his hit points, and I am going to kill him. I'm probably going to take 1 hit, and not only that, but you might notice that his reload time appears to be affected in addition to his aim. So let's see what happens.
Critical hit.
So you'll notice I got a critical hit, and critical hit is supposed to mean that you damaged an internal module of the tank. I want you to be able to watch how much damage is done also. So I'm not going to zoom in too far. Now that shot hit right where the little red triangle is. The hole where the gun sight is right next to it. So I barely missed the hole. I don't know if it did any damage to the gunner or not. There's no way to know without the eagle eye feature of the game. Now in this case, if you hit the side of the tank, you see where the red star is and to the left, or the red star over here and to the right, you can damage that tank. It might do, instead of 300 damage, it might do only half. It might only do 150 damage. But it does work.
Critical hit.
Another critical hit.
Critical hit. Critical hit.
You'll notice that he is not hitting me. He has taken shots. His gun has been pointed at me, I would say, for about 20 seconds now, and I have taken no damage, and I don't think he's hit me once. I think all of his shots have gone into the ground.
Critical hit.
That time I did 30 damage.
That one didn't go through. We didn't even scratch them. We didn't even scratch them. Critical hit. We didn't penetrate their armor. Critical hit.
54 damage. During that whole time, look at where all of my shots hit. All those shots, I was aiming for the gunner hole, which is right here. And you can see I hit one a little bit above, a little bit below, a little under the gun. Oh, there's another hole over here. Oh, I hope I didn't make a mistake. It's possible I was shooting by something else by mistake. You see there's a little hole where the green dot is? That might be where the gunner is. And maybe I was shooting there by mistake. Maybe I was shooting at something that I thought was the gunner hole, but was really a hole from damage done by the gun. Okay, so I might have made the mistake during the game. It's not that big of a deal. But
Critical hit.
you can see that I only took 400 damage.
We didn't even scratch them.
I guess I did take another shot.
Drive on. That one didn't go through.
Now right there, he's opening himself up to taking damage with an APCR round because he's exposing that flat surface, which I missed.
We didn't even scratch them.
Okay.
Enemy vehicle destroyed.
So I finally hit it. But the point was that by hitting the gun mantle and the gunner hole with high explosive rounds, you can affect his reload time and his accuracy. And that's the reason why it's done.